Hey, I'm Dr. Steve Chee, integrative East-West physician and somatic IFS therapist. In this interview, I had the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Francois Le Doze. In it, he shares how his own personal healing crisis has led to profound insights in healing our deepest wounds. I think you'll find this conversation both inspiring and insightful. So I'm so excited, Francois. Thank you so much for taking some time to be with us. For those of you who don't know Francois Le Doze, he is a former neurologist, spent 30 years in a teaching hospital in France, and has been was a former lead trainer for internal family systems and really had a key role in the development of the model and expanding the model into France. Is that correct?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So welcome, and we're so welcome to have to hear about what it is that you're doing now and
No.
where your own
Yeah.
journey has led you.
So thank you very much, Stephen, for contacting me and giving me this opportunity to just talk about my work, my personal journey. I think this is something that's important to you to understand from the journey of the person who is talking, from that journey, what are the connection with the wisdom, whatever the person is doing on a professional level. So it's an opportunity for me to do that and appreciate that. Also to talk about my research and the model I'm developing, which is named Relational Intelligence. So this is a really yeah such an opportunity also as this model is gaining traction in Northern America. I will talk about that later, to have this opportunity to speak in English to English speaking audience, which is because I don't have so much material in English so far. I don't know. Yeah, and I appreciate that opportunity. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm so excited. It's relationships, as we were just talking a moment ago, are so key and so important. And
Mm.
I'm so curious, just where are you drawn in this moment to kind of begin our conversation around this?
Mhm. Yeah, I can. I really resonate with you as you say, as you emphasize the importance for yourself of the relationship. I would, and just what came to my mind when you said that, it was when I encountered the IFS. It was in 2005, and one of the things that was so that was so meaningful to me, apart from the this idea of the self, which we probably will come back to it later, was the fact that it was internal family system was really about creating, forming relationship within, between self and parts, as we all know, most of us know. And I resonated with that. At the time I was not really seeing the importance of that, how that is so important to really restore, uh, repair those relationships that were kind of damaged by trauma. Um, but this idea was very important to me, probably also because of my faith, my spiritual journey as a Christian, and because I envision my vision from spiritual life is really to establish a relationship with God. It's not to be separate from God, but really the thing is to establish this relationship with God. And
Yes.
so it was kind of a magic thing that to have this model that was doing that within. And so this is what I was set to start this interview, and to let you know how I developed this idea of restoring the relationship within and also with I said within and also I say how to say that in English. You say from the inside, also outside with another person, in order to heal deeper inside. And we'll
Yes.
talk about that later. Yeah.
I, I
So,
so I so appreciate what you're sharing, the kind of the layers of this,
mhm.
right? The internal layer, the relational layer, and then also, a bigger kind of
Yeah.
spiritual relationship and the
Mhm.
importance of it. And it sounds like, the internal family systems model was very helpful in orienting you towards looking at self in part. And it also sounds like there's something deeper that you in your
Mhm.
own experience has kind of found with that.
Mhm.
Would you
Yeah.
like to
So
share a little bit more
yeah, of
about?
course. Yeah. Yeah, but first I would like to just to mention again, not again, yeah, something so important that was my encounter with the will of self, with the realizing what self is within, and through the model to the IFS model. The IFS model was to me key, is unique at modelizing self and parts, and also how to access self, which is because many philosophies or spiritualities talk about self, but with IFS we have a concrete way to access self, and to recognize self as a state, and to have a way to identify it within and other people. So to me, this was a game-changing thing to be able to have this practice in the model for myself and with my clients, to have this better knowledge and to be more and more accurate in identifying if I'm in self or not, if I'm in self or in self-like parts. And this was really important to me. So I would say that there was a before and after, in where as I'm talking to you now, I think there is nothing on earth that is worth doing without self. It's obvious that it's so important to be able to do whatever we do, to relate whatever we with anybody without self. It doesn't mean anything. It's really not worthy to do that. So so important to
Yes.
and so thankful to the model to for giving me this capacity to identify that and to embody it. So not only identify,
Yes.
but also to embody it and to practice that. Yeah. And so this was a big game-changing thing for my own personal life, because when I encountered the model, I was going through a personal crisis, which was I described that in my book, which was related to depression, and I was
Hmm.
looking for I had been looking for through psychoanalysis and other practices to heal myself. And when I encountered IFS, I was really able to make a step forward towards my own healing, thanks to understanding that self is the healing, is the healer within, and
Yes.
allowed me to overcome most of the difficulties I was encountering with depression that I was not able to overcome before. I had not been able to overcome before. So yes, this was the big thing in my life. This first crisis I was in my early 30s.
Hmm.
IFS and how I was able to deepen my healing and to move forward. And discovering this realm of internal relationships between self and parts, and as a consequence between self and the body, because as we know, self is embodied, parts are embodied, and as we create self parts relationship, we embody self, obviously. So this
Yes.
is a very much embodied work, and I was so passionate about that dimension of having an embodied spirituality and embodied
Yes.
healing, something that involves the body, especially because I was a medical doctor, of course, and I was so I did that. I brought that to my medical practice, and I practiced IFS with my clients, which were people affected by migraine or multiple sclerosis. And so took maybe for 3 or 4 years, and I did behavioral medicine using IFS with my practice. And then it took like maybe 10 years. I did this work in the hospital. I was allowed to do that and to develop that. And I brought the first IFS training with Dick and Susan McConnell in France in my hospital. Then became a therapist. I was not a therapist before, and an IFS lead trainer. And then you want me to explain all this my journey, and
Yeah,
how I got to this point.
this is so fascinating.
Yeah,
I really appreciate your
yeah,
sharing. Yeah, please,
yeah.
please
So,
continue.
oh yeah, I will. And then maybe, well, another crisis. As you know, crises are so important in life. It's not easy, but when, as you know, that it's such an opportunity. Chaos is an opportunity to let emerge new things, new wisdom, new creativity. So I had this second one, which happened some years before, and was a very special one. Maybe it was my I was about 50, and it was a different one because when I had this one, it was in the context of a very dysfunctional relationship with, let's say, in my professional background. Let's say I won't be more specific about that, but it was something new to me that I felt attacked, I felt betrayed, I felt, and was new to me, and it was not comfortable. But the good thing in this, the nugget of this, that was I realized that, so I was affected by that. I was traumatized by that.
Of course.
And also I had to ask myself what in me led me to experience this.
Yes.
And so I had to go inside and to find what drove me, pulled me to that situation that I was in.
Yes.
And I wasn't able to recognize, in other words, how could I, what led me to put myself in and to let unsafe relationship, and establish a safe relationship, and not say no to that, and not set my limits and preserve myself and protect myself. And when I did that, when I asked myself this, and I looked for therapy, and I realized that I couldn't address that in terms of parts. Obviously, it was something different. And to go back to what you said before, because you said you talked about something deeper that I had probably found or discovered. It was that. That was then when I was in that crisis, and I did this parts work with a therapist who was IFS trained, but not only IFS trained, she was also trained in AEDP, but she was also I would say, informed by the attachment theory. It was attachment theory informed.
Yes.
So she had other tools, and she had practiced not only doing this with this self-regulation that we all do in IFS, but she also was more relational in the work she was doing with me. And at some point, I realized that as she was engaging directly, explicitly to me, I was very defensive. And I said, wow, this is something new. This is something new to me. I realized that I cannot hold the gaze of this person as she's using her gaze towards me. And this was really giving such an uncomfort. I was really, I could feel in my body that this was very uncomfortable. And so this was the beginning, the entry point to the realm of attachment issue, my own attachment disorders, to the realm of the autonomic nervous system, and to the co-regulation. So this was the very beginning of it. And I realized that I had to go deeper than the level of the parts in order to, still with the self, of course, but deeper, and trying to find ways to address those issues that I was caught in with other modalities than the parts work.
Yes.
To begin with, if I can go further if you want.
Yes. No, this is beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So then this was the entry point to this world. But I didn't know much about that world. I'm now able to talk about attachment theory, polyvagal theory, co-regulation. But at that time, I was totally unaware of that.
Of course.
Totally unaware of that. I was not able to modelize that at all. So some years later, I couldn't say exactly I don't have the exact timing, but I had the opportunity to meet with, and thanks to Susan McConnell, she was my mentor in IFS as an IFS lead trainer. She mentored me, so I want to name her today. This is a very good thing for me to do. So Susan McConnell had the idea to have Deb Dana, who you probably know, as many therapists know do now, to connect Deb Dana to me, because she thought we could have we could create some opportunities to work together to create something together, combining IFS and polyvagal theory.
Oh,
Susan McConnell, knowing that I was a neurologist and I was open to neuroscience, so I invited her to do a workshop in France, and the goal of this was to kind of with a group of students to interface polyvagal theory and IFS and see what could emerge from that. But before we did that, I met with Deb Dana in a conference. It was in 2016, I think, or 17. But well, and I also so we met together at this point, and also at this conference, I met with Deirdre Fay, who did the training. She did a workshop at the pre-conference, and that I wanted to attend. She was talking. She had this vision of talking about IFS and the relational dimension, the intersubjective, the interpersonal dimension of the IFS, because she wanted to point out how important it is to bring the interpersonal piece between the therapist and the patient to the inner work between self and the parts, to put that together. And she talked about, I love that expression, the IFS 2.0. And this was what I was kind of already thinking about. And she named it so clearly. And this is where I wanted to go, to this this new IFS, which would be dimensional, which would include the relational space between the client and the therapist. So yes. This was one big thing. So, and I met her, and she introduced me to the intersubjectivity world, and especially to the Meta-Cognition that I'm really using a lot in my model. How we get conscious, the co-conscious, how that changed the inner world as both the therapist and the client are aware of the same thing together.
Yes.
It's key, so important. So she brought that in this pre-conference, and Deb Dana brought to me the polyvagal piece. And when I had the pre-conference, I met Deirdre Fay, I met Deb Dana, I had those two inputs, and all of a sudden I realized those two pieces had to come together to make something new to me that I wanted to bring to my practice as a therapist. And this was the beginning of the modelization of my model, how to add to the self-regulation, the co-regulation piece based on self.
Yes.
In order to address those deeper trauma that I was experiencing myself, and this second crisis, which were basically trauma related to attachment issues, my attachment issues. So yes. I have a vision of kind of an upper, the world of parts, which to me was in this upper brain. I call it the upper brain, the brain which is more explicit, this brain able to make explicit memories. And this lower brain, I call it more lower brain, which is the autonomic nervous system, named in the field of IFS, it's named like this, but I call it the lower brain, which is the implicit brain, where the attachment issues, the attachment trauma is embedded, is encrypted. So I had this vision that IFS was very much able to address those issues. This parts work that related to trauma that we could have later in life, but as to address those more profound trauma related to attachment wounds, I had to modelize something else, which is this relational piece with a therapist, using Meta-Cognition, using polyvagal, and what I call now, and those two pieces. I put that together, and I created what I call the conscious therapeutic engagement, which is a modality where we use both metacognition and physical engagement to address those trauma that is so deeply encrypted. And sometimes those, we call it also structural dissociation. So upper brain parts, lower brain states, and upper parts is very well addressed by self-regulation, as opposed to those states which are embedded in the lower brain, which to me is not, for biological reasons, cannot be addressed by self-regulations, because this brain is constructed, this lower brain is constructed for safety with another individual. It's traumatized by relationship, and can only be healed by relationship, self-led relationship.
Yes.
So it's a co-regulation piece, upper brain self-regulation and lower brain co-regulation. In both cases, self is the one doing the work, but the modalities are different.
Yeah, and I really want to underscore something and just check in around something you're describing, because this is really profound what you're sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And how I'm hearing it is that the way that people may try to connect with these lower brain states, if they're trying to do it through here in the upper brain, not in a way that's connecting, that it could not be effective, right? I'm wondering if you can speak to like why this could even be perpetuating the very dynamic that is underlying the separation. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I will rephrase that if you mind. You're asking if keeping doing the self-regulation work as we address states can perpetuate the trauma.
Yes, like this
can perpetuate. Yeah,
it's almost like
so.
That's the attachment style is actually either avoiding the
exactly.
and just being in the intellect or the mind, or and not actually fully connecting with the state of actually, letting the system come into a relationship dynamic that allows that by itself safety starts to emerge through the relationship.
Exactly. I think this is exactly the way I see it. And we know that already from the work with IFS, because the big challenge is IFS to me, which was the big challenge when I used to teach it. It was 7 years ago. That was the blending. Blending is the big thing, the big clinical challenge in IFS.
Yes.
And to me, I see blending as states. To me, blending is a state. To me, blending can be seen as a part being blended. It's a way to see it from. But to me, it's more meaningful to see it as a state. It's no more apart from it, but it's just a state of the nervous system which is dysregulated. And we can see it through the lens of polyvagal theory. It might be a dorsal state, it might be a sympathetic state, whatever. Oftentimes it's a dorsal state. But as soon as we put it in this way, it is clear that self-regulation is not able to do that, is not able to heal this, because states are related to safety, basically.
Yes.
And safety tells something about the external world, mostly. So when, in other words, to make it very simple, when I'm in a blended parts, I would say in relational intelligence, I'm in a state, and as we would say in polyvagal theory. And as I'm in a state, it's very likely that this is related to a danger that I was exposed to and I wasn't able to escape in the past.
Yes.
Whatever the nature of danger was, and we may come back to that, but mostly this danger is experienced in the context of unsafe attachment, in the framework of an unsafe attachment, basically.
Yes.
So this is it's because this is very biological. It's very simple. This nervous system is oriented towards the outside, so it's from the outside that the self needs to be experienced. It's
Yes,
very
yes,
simple, and
yes.
as we do that, we can address a very deep blending, very deep dysregulated state because we have the modalities that are adapted, that are fine to do this work. That's yeah.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful you're bringing this forward because I mean, in my own practice and experience with this, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. In dealing with blended states in IFS, often the question of asking a part to step back,
Mhm,
sometimes that's really not that effective. And in
mhm,
my experience, they may not. And I find, and I'm curious on how you would frame this in terms of not asking it to step back, so to speak, but actually finding a way of connecting
mm.
so that
Yeah,
so that through connection, the state or the state of that can, because to me, sometimes asking a part to step back, if it's not maybe attuned, could even feel potentially shaming to the state that like there's something wrong with me. Like, why am I, what's wrong
yeah,
with me if I'm feeling this way? And
mm.
you're asking me to step back from, but I'm
Yeah,
right. It seems kind of like a almost potentially mirroring a,
yeah,
like both a
yeah,
pushing and a pulling kind of,
yeah,
do you get what I'm saying?
exactly. Yeah, of course I do. And maybe and I think what might happen is you are not able to do this. Being a client, the therapist asks the participant step to unblend, and this is not possible. So other parts may pop up and have a comment on this and say, "You're not good. You have a problem. You're unable to blah 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 blah." Blah. So
Yes.
you might create some stuff. You might create an additional layer of parts that are might be created by the therapeutic interventions themselves. So this is possibility. In some other instances, I remember one client who had no parts when she would go inside. She couldn't find any parts. She had
Yes.
no parts, and
Interesting.
no parts. She couldn't identify any parts. But she had states, and so the thing is that, as you ask me, how do you do this? I would change totally my perspective as when I identify that the person is, I would say, blended, or they. Well, before that, just I will correct that. I always ask my clients, do you experience a part or a state? I never assume that this is a part or a state. I say, do you experience a part or do you experience a state? And so at the beginning of the therapy, people might maybe understand what I mean by state. I explain, and it becomes very easy afterwards to identify as a state is something that you feel blended with. You are that. You are like numb. You are in a rage, and a part would be an aspect of you that you can separate from. You can see it's not totally you. So I use this very simple phrasing, and people get it very easily.
Yes.
So my clients are able to say for themselves, this is a part of this is a state. And when they say this is a state, or when they don't know, sometimes I don't know. So then I assume this is a state. And so as soon as a client say, well, this is a state, or I don't know, and I assume this is a state, I do co-regulation. So I change the modality and I
Um,
go through co-regulation and I practice what I call the conscious therapeutic engagement. I practice according to what I learned from the data, plus what I developed based on Deirdre teaching that I really developed, Meta-Cognition. I use those two modalities to connect, bring myself through my body in a very conscious and
yeah.
very clear. It's not something that comes from me, like I don't know what I'm doing. I just going to my client and I don't know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. I have a I have questions. I know exactly when I go when I engage physically or my cognition. So it's very important to know that. And I do that. I do this for example, if a person say, well, I feel numb, I feel like a low energy body, I would come closer and put my hand in the back, in her back, and in their back. and see what happens then. Is there a sympathetic, something that happens that is telling me that the sympathetic is being activated, and the person is getting out of the dissociation, or nothing happens and the person is still in the dissociation, and then keep going with my model. So in order to respond to what you said before, I would never ask a part to separate. I would say, well, this is a state. I'm not asking anything to this person. I would do the withdrawal myself and commit and connect in a very conscious way and see what happens in my client, in the body of my clients, as I intend to connect, or as I connect physically first.
Yes.
And all what happens in the body of the person can be picked up, can be utilized to keep going with the therapeutic process.
Yes.
And get to a point where the person is able to really get out of dissociation, because those states are related to dissociation, as parts are also. But basically, this is dissociation, that is traumatic dissociation, that is underlying the process, the whole thing.
I so appreciate the relational dynamic, and there's a concept that I frequently find really fascinating when it comes to relationships, and that is this notion of emergence. When there is a state of relationship dynamic, there's something that emerges.
Exactly.
And to me, it's actually, there's a principle in Chinese medicine that I've connected with self-energy, that self-energy emerges from relationship. The dynamic itself is what leads to connection. Our way of being is that. And so I'm just so I'm curious, as you're talking about, really beautifully about your internal state, the clarity, your way of being, and the connection with people in those states, that something you're tracking, right? It sounds like, and then something is emerging through that you're being with them in a felt sense, right? And to me, that sounds, I'm saying it a different way.
Exactly. The word tracking is very appropriate. I'm tracking as I'm committing myself, as I'm through my body connecting to my client. I am tracking the reaction, what's emerging within the client, and this could be. Oftentimes, it's not self in the first place. Oftentimes, it could be more dorsal energy, more dissociation. It could be sympathetic, or it could be self energy. Oftentimes, the first steps are more dorsal or sympathetic.
Yes.
You want me to explain more about that?
Yes. Yeah, please. Yeah. Yes. No, this is fascinating. Thank you.
In case what happens in the client as I engage physically, according to a very, very well clear protocol, because this cannot be done. This has to be done very thoroughly. But when I do this, I ask what happens in your body as I'm just putting my hand in your back, or I'm getting closer or changing my way, whatever. It is physical.
Yes. Accordingly
to the model. And I say, what happens in your body now? And the person would say, well, all of a sudden I can feel a high level of body energy.
Yeah.
This is, as I learned from Dana, an indication that the sympathetic is being activated. And then I follow that. I say, well, focus on this sympathetic activity, because I know, based on the polyvagal theory, that sympathetic is the way to get out of dissociation of the dorsal state, way up to the self energy, to the ventral state. So I ask the person to keep with that energy of sympathetic. It can be a shaking, it can be an emotion, it can be an insight, whatever it is that is non-dorsal, which is something that is happening.
Yes.
And we follow that. And the work of the therapist is to go with it always in safety.
Yes,
safe relation to get, because we know that the nervous system will go to the ventral state and to self-energy eventually.
Yes.
So this is the first case. The other case is that what happens in your body as I'm doing this, and this person would say, I feel more numb, I feel disconnected, nothing happens.
Yes.
So this is more dorsal, more dissociation. And at this point, the therapist knows that this is the physical engagement is perceived as unsafe. And this is so important that the therapist has now the indication that as he engages, there's this paradox that the system needs engagement, physical engagement, but as we do it, it just feels it as dangerous. So this is the paradox. The paradox we all know in trauma, in attachment trauma, that we need relationship when we're in attachment trauma, but it was so difficult in the past. Those attachment is safe because of the insecure attachment that we had with our parents, that the system rejects it. But so it's the double constraint. We want it, but we reject it. We don't have. So this is what happens when the person is in dorsal. We engage and say more dorsal. I feel disconnected. I don't want you. I don't want you connect. But in fact, I need it. The nervous system needs it.
Yes.
And this is where I offer to use metacognition. I will put in place, I will not keep going with the physical dimension because this is perceived as dangerous. And it would be really overriding the system to keep doing this. I stop this physical engagement. And how can we still connect and feel very connected to the client without this physical engagement? To me, we have this magnificent tool, which is metacognition.
Yes.
How we can be co-conscious of what is happening in you. And this is where I bring this, what I learned from Dr. Fay, and I'm bringing to my work, which is this metacognition protocol, and basically it's how stopping the physical engagement and going to the metacognition, which is an indirect way to engage, safer way, but still to be connected with the client, but in a safe way.
Exactly.
So we get out of this paradox. We get out of that. Because the thing is that when we're a therapist and the client is blended, is this dorsal state in his defensive towards the clinical intervention, what comes up in the therapist is, I am powerless.
Yes, exactly.
This is he has a problem, and I cannot do more. And then we reenact the attachment issue, which is I leave you, I abandon you, and you have a problem. And we do this reenactment. We do this. The risk is to do that. So in order to avoid that risk, I offer to use metacognition, which is a way to really still connect, still engage, but in a safer way.
I really appreciate this, and to me, there's such an importance of feeling that somebody gets you, right? And
exactly.
To me, and that to me is kind of what you're talking about. That even though they're in a state that they're connecting to it, and then something, if they go more dorsal, if they collapse even further,
exactly,
that there is a way that you can still connect in a way that the system can feel that they're maybe not alone with what they're experiencing, even though the body is doing that. Is that
exactly? There's this double experience. They are alone because in this dorsal state, they are alone. And at the same time, they are seen as alone by somebody else. So they're not alone. So they're both alone and seen by someone else. They see themselves alone, and they know that somebody else is seeing them alone. So, and this is the special this special association. There's a special space where the person is able to get out of it. The nervous system will find a way through that to the nervous system will think, this is safe. This therapist is not pushing towards me, is not trying to do something with me, but just seeing me. And as I am seen is such a place of vulnerability. It's such a so thoughtfully, so mindfully, I'm now able to open up a little bit.
Yes.
To go towards the self-energy, the vital state. This is what I see.
Yes. And to me, I'm curious your thoughts on this. It's like there's probably, I'm guessing as the therapist, such a fine line between mentally connecting, which in the I'm just imagining myself at different times with different clients and like, oh, that didn't work. but like I'm coming from my mind to connect, which in a way in my body almost feels like I'm doing this to them. This because it
Mm.
doesn't feel as clear or as connecting as I'm getting you, and
Mhm.
through a kind of a felt sense of the therapist in this state,
Exactly.
kind of being with them. And to me, it just
Exactly.
seems like it's, even though you're using the word metacognition, it's not a
Cognition thing.
purely, yes, it's a,
Yeah.
because it's actually it's in and of itself. I'm curious if you can elaborate. It's a state of, it's a, I mean, maybe a state of self or something where there's, it actually seems very genuinely connected to the heart as well, because it's
Yeah.
not, can you speak more to that?
Exactly. Yeah, of course. Well, I'll say that the piece cognition and the word metacognition is not appropriate at all because it's not based on, it's not a cognition thing. It's not cognition, it's not primarily a cognitive activity that we're doing. What we're doing, we're using our cognition just in order to convey the consciousness that we have onto the other people. It's just, we just make explicit that we are aware of the other person. So in order to do that, we make it explicit. So we use cognition, but profoundly and basically, this is something that has to do with self. The self being a witness
Yes, yes, yes.
to the other person. So we make it explicit. We use cognition, but basically, it is what you say. That is the self being the witness of the other person in the state where he or she is.
You know, one of the things that I've, in my own awareness with my own system, is the difference on how either an awareness or an insight emerges in the system versus the way a thought, the way of thinking, my thinking mind emerges. And to me, it sounds like there's a way of being with, that there's a,
Yeah,
like this again, this notion of emergence, that this state is where we're together looking at this, and it's, would you agree with that? That there's something emerging that has this qualities of self, and it's not
exactly.
necessarily my mind is thinking, but it's
No,
it's it's a it's using the faculties of the intellect, but through it, self is aware and relating and connecting.
exactly. I see. We should look at that on the side of the therapist and on the side of the client. In the therapist, in relational intelligence, the therapist is expected when doing, when practicing metacognition, not to be in an intellectual part. Is expected to be really much in self and very much in self, and just bringing the awareness through language, conveying to the client, making the client aware that I'm aware that I'm aware, not judgmental, and I'm aware of this. That's all what it is about.
Yes.
This is in the client. This is really not the outcome of any intellectual emergence in the therapist,
Yes.
as opposed to the client, where we can have on the way of getting out of dissociation different things that happen in the client, which might be intellectual, which might be emotional, which might be whatever it is, and then we can have intellectual insights or something that looks like self. But this is different. This is the process of elaborating and getting out of dissociation, which is happening in the client as opposed to the therapist, which is very much supposed to be expected to be in self, and just using its own cognition to practice the model. That's all. That's all about that, and to know the protocol and to use it very appropriately. This is all
Sure,
what
of
we
course.
on the intellectual level. Other than that, it is really about consciousness, openness, and respect of the boundaries of the clients, of the client, as it is
Yes.
set by the dorsal, by whatever is. I respect this, but I don't abandon you. You don't want me to get closer. I don't abandon you. I still connected to you by letting you know how much I'm aware of what is happening in you, and ultimately the trauma that is behind that, which is another step, which was called mentalization. We can go further because some dorsal some dorsal states related to very deep, and we say structural dissociation, are very much resistant even to metacognition as I depicted it. So because they're structural, this is so deep and structural to the personality. So then we have to add a piece to metacognition, this metacognition that I described before, and to add something that is looks more intellectual, that we're going to mentalize, like to bring to this metacognition pieces that we know about trauma, that we know from other
Yes.
like from attachment theory, whatever we know from, we can bring that from the neuroscience of trauma, whatever. But we bring those pieces and we've in the act of doing metacognition in order for the client to get understood deeply by the therapist and to have additional pieces, because sometimes just being aware is not enough for those people who are so stuck in an attachment issue. So they need more. They need to have more than just the awareness, more information, which can be polyvagal, whatever. And sometimes when it's so structural, they need another therapist. They need two people to be aware of that. Another, so I could comment, and this is another thing.
This is so fascinating. And it to me, and it's like to me, how I'm hearing it's like a greater context sometimes is necessary to kind of help kind of maybe anchor what's happening. If it's not enough just to be aware, there needs to be a greater, because to me, it almost makes it feel like it's saying like, I understand what you're going through. I understand, like, and helping them, this is a part of a process that's maybe even natural or physiologic, which can help them to feel more safe in terms of something that is inherently, as you've been describing, paradoxically feeling very unsafe or very right, and to help them to connect. I'm so curious, how does I don't know this, I'm just asking, neurobiologically, you talk about the lower brain in these states or this dorsal collapse and such. It's fascinating that this type of way of connecting, you're calling it metacognition. I'm curious if you can speak to how and why biologically, like, that's effective. Is there something about the way the brain is structured or neurobiologically what's happening that way of connecting is really maybe even critical or in helping them? Because it's like almost like I always have this belief that our physiology is way smarter than we are. Like we just don't understand fully what we've been given, this human body. And there's something maybe about it that seems very intuitive to approach it this way. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, what I can say that I'm sure about is the neurobiology of dissociation, because this is well established in the literature. We know that dissociation is traumatic dissociation, whether it's from an attachment trauma or from in the context of a PTSD, whatever comes later in life. All this brings results in bringing dissociation within the brain, which is related to secretion of endorphins and cannabinoids, let's say. So we know that. This we know for sure. And that we know that the dorsal pathway that is this from polyvagal theory is very much related to the endorphin system, as opposed to the sympathetic, more connected to adrenaline and other neurotransmitters. So this we know. We know that the dorsal, through the endorphins, is able to kind of inhibit the sympathetic. And this is the basis for dissociation and social dissociation and whatever dissociation is in the lower brain. So we know that. But I think that your question is, how is it that when you engage, whether physically or through metacognition, you have this capacity, the brain has this capacity to get out of dissociation.
Yes, exactly.
And this, I'm wondering also, I don't know. The chemistry of this, I don't know. I don't know what happens when the system, the nervous system, the brain of one client is exposed to this, to those interventions, co-regulation interventions, I don't know. I don't know what happens in the brain, but at some point, I
Yeah.
think that there is this, it's kind of the sympathetic is in this context, when it's safe enough, and there is a new chemistry is in the body, but the sympathetic is able to take over the dorsal and to push the dorsal back and to regain some power in the system and to have the dorsal go back to its normal place and lead to the ventral. This is the outcome. How that works, I don't know. I probably some neuroscientists could be able to say something about that. Maybe Ruth Lanius, which I will meet in a couple of weeks, on the occasion of a training in Toronto, will be able to explain that. I don't know. I don't know.
It's so
But
interesting.
this happens for sure.
And to me, what I really appreciate about it is this intentionality of connecting and working with physiology as
Exactly.
opposed
Yeah.
to and letting it. And to me, it's always interesting. There's this principle in Chinese medicine
Mhm.
that Qi arises from the interaction of yin and yang.
Mhm.
Health is a balance when the yin and the yang can come into harmony. Disease is actually either extreme, one or the other. And to me, I'm just listening to this in terms of these states, how it's fascinating, like how you're describing a way of kind of coming into harmony, coming into resonance with
Mhm.
certain states in this, the qi in Chinese medicine, they even talk about the life force starts
Mhm.
to regain. And there's such a beautiful way of honoring what's actually happening and not I just love it. It's so beautiful. It's actually
Yeah.
so elegant. And
Yeah.
I love how it helps people to ultimately connect into
Yeah.
something that could be so harmful, so hurtful. So I mean our deepest, right, as you mentioned. And yet
Yeah.
we can find, to me, this is the beauty of healing and of truly connecting, something that could be very challenging into something so much greater. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Totally resonate with you. It's the beauty of allowing different pieces of us, of whatever it is, but to reassociate, to make possible that aspects of us, qi, yin, yang, or whatever it is, depending on the whether we're more Oriental or more Western, how that is meant to be associated. And when we allow that to happen, this is the beauty. This is the beauty of healing, and this is possible.
Yeah,
So,
no, I love this.
mm,
This is I'm aware
yeah,
of I mean there were so many other things I
yeah,
wanted to talk to you about.
yeah,
I'm aware of the time and
yeah,
I don't know if there's anything. I know you have a training upcoming and I'm sure
yeah,
people are curious, is there anything else that you'd like to speak to or share to
yeah.
or just
I
anything
think.
else to wrap up or any other loose ends
Mm,
that you want to make sure that you speak to?
I think that thanks to your questions and your openness, your to what I'm bringing, um, I think that I said the most important things about the model. I was really able to bring to the persons who are listening to this podcast what I find the most important in this model. So thank you very much for that. There is much more to tell about the model itself, how we practice this. But this is this is to be addressed in the training, of course. We could talk more about structural dissociation, the importance of co-therapy, the importance of polyattachment. This is in the therapies as an attachment figure, therapeutic attachment figure. This is a lot of good, maybe another podcast, but the very essential of it, I think I'm feel complete with it. So thank you
It's
very much.
Yes, no, I love it.
Yeah,
I'd love to talk to you more. I really would love to talk too about the
yeah,
um the physical elements of this
yeah,
because and the impact I really feel like this goes so deep beyond just obviously the mind and the
yeah,
emotion, but into when we
exactly.
start addressing it. So yeah, I would love
Mm,
to hear
mm.
your thoughts on
Yeah,
that.
I think they were.
So if people are interested in your trainings,
Yeah,
like what should they do? And we
yeah,
can put this into the description as well.
yeah. Well, I have a website that is accessible in French and in English. People can click on the appropriate flag to get the English version. So we have trainings organized in Northern America, in Montreal, which for now is bilingual, French, English, and translated simultaneously. There is one coming starting soon in November, and we are planning to do other trainings on a regular basis, every yearly, I think, at least, and probably more than that, as we have more maybe trainers, English-speaking trainers in the future. And also, I like to mention, so people can go to and just browse the website and get the information about the training, and they can sign up for it. Even I think there's possibilities for people who would like to do this coming training, this upcoming trainings, that they can do it. We have some spaces left. And also I would like to mention the first article in English related to describing the model, which is in English. It's a chapter that I wrote in a co-authored book, which will be published by Norton and co-edited by Stephen Porges. And this book is named Somatic Oriented Therapies. So just to mention that, it will come out in next February, and you guys who speak English will be able to access this chapter. This is the first. I'm very proud of it. This is the first description of the model in English, and then I think in an academic format, which is I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's so great. I so appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to being at your upcoming training.
I'm very glad.
I'm very excited to be to
Me too.
dive deeper into this with you and everyone else. And
Me too.
thank you,
You're
Francois,
very
so much.
welcome, Stephen. Thank you to you too for allowing this to happen. Bye bye.
Yeah.